that by means of introduction. Now, in order to talk more about the terminology we saw used in the European Charter, we first need to do some moral groundwork and talk about the most basic concepts we encounter when we talk about ethics, when we talk about morality. And it doesn't get much more basic than good and bad and evil. Nietzsche makes two different distinctions. He distinguishes between good and bad and good and evil. First, we're going to talk about good and bad, and it will become clear why he distinguishes between bad and evil in a few slides. So first, that distinction between good and bad. The first important thing to bear in mind about this distinction is that Nietzsche says that in this case, the good and bad case, as opposed to the distinction between good and evil, in the distinction between good and bad, the good comes first. What does he mean by that? The good comes first. Well, in order to explain this, he talks about the so-called noble or aristocratic person. The image I used here is very purposefully chosen because, of course, we all know, well, maybe you haven't followed this show, which is obviously no problem. The reason I'm using this image is that the show Vikings obviously is fiction and is presented as such. And very similar to this show, Nietzsche uses Vikings as fictional characters that serve his story. So again, we're not too much concerned with actual historic fact, what Vikings were actually like. He uses them as a group of people to make a particular point. And the point here concerns this noble or aristocratic person. Who is this person? Well, this person feels him or herself to be happy and does not need to prove it. So a very good way to understand this kind of person is to think of yourself on your best days. Those days where you just feel self-confident, there's no need to prove that you are happy, you just are. You are active, you're engaged with stuff, you're busy living your life, and there's an immediate discharge, by which Nietzsche means that if something's bothering you, you just talk about it, you let it out, you don't let it fester, you don't take it inside. What is essential to this kind of person is the capacity to forget. And again, if you think of yourself on those very good days, those are the days that if something bad happens to you, say somebody offends you or just does something rather nasty, you can forget about it. In fact, you don't even have to try. It just kind of slides right off. You have a tendency to take things lightly. There's no resentment, there's no suspicion. These are the sort of sunny, happy days that seem to kind of just unroll by themselves without you even having to try. Right? They're the days where you can be spontaneous, and this is very important. There's a possibly barbaric element to this kind of attitude, according to Nietzsche, because there's a simplicity to it. You don't really need much of an interior world. You don't really need much of a mind when you're in this particular mood. This, again, is also why Nietzsche refers to Vikings to illustrate this kind of person. So don't be confused by the terminology here, because when we see noble and aristocratic, we're perhaps tempted to think of something much fancier, something much more cerebral or classy than the kind of person that Nietzsche has in mind. If you ever watched the Flintstones, which of course is a very old show, you might have encountered this character, Bam Bam, and his name kind of says it all, right? He just smashes things he doesn't like and otherwise is a very happy kind of individual. So what's central to the conception of the world according to this noble or aristocratic person? It all starts with him or herself. So the good, according to the noble or aristocratic person, is me, right? Like it's a very egocentric kind of worldview, you could say. So returning to that distinction, the good as defined by this person simply is myself, right? What's the good? Well, I am good. Excuse me. So only in a secondary movement do we think of those other people who don't seem to be very good, right? Like you start with yourself, I'm just happy, confident. What's the good? Well, me. And then, oh, there's these other people. They don't seem to be very good. I'm going to call them bad. The German used here is schlecht. Now, what's essential here? That originally, these terms good and bad have no moral connotation. They are meant to simply distinguish the rest of the world from oneself. I am good, oh, and then there's the rest. And well, they're not very good, and that's kind of too bad for them. So it's more like, oh, those unfortunates, right? They're not bad in a moral sense, they're bad in the sense of to be pitied. Now, the importance of this distinction comes out particularly when we talk about good and evil, which is the next step Nietzsche takes in the genealogy. So again, if there is a judgment here, it's almost more of an aesthetic kind. The good feel themselves to be happy, they don't need to prove it, it's completely self-evident, and then they see these other people who are simply not like them in terms of happiness, but are rather miserable by comparison, and these people they call bad. No judgment here, at least not in a moral sense, almost more a sign of pity. Oh, it's too bad you guys are not like me, right? Happy, self-confident, etc. Now, of course, we also want to look at the world from the other perspective and ask, what about those who don't feel happy? Who are these people, and what is their role in the genealogy of morality? The predominant feeling in the life of these bad people, according to Nietzsche, is resentment. And so, who are these bad people in, again, that previous distinction that for the moment still lacks any moral connotation? These bad people are resentful. And that's why I've used this picture here of Draco Malfoy. Now, whether you're familiar with the Harry Potter universe or not, you can probably think of characters, whether fictional or real life examples, to match the description that we're going to go through here. The person of resentment is resentful about everything that prevents him or her from getting what he or she wants. What is essential in understanding this character is that his or her nature is essentially reactive. So as where we saw with the happy person, right, the noble or aristocratic person, that they were essentially active, acting on their own accord as autonomous being, happy and self-confident. The person of resentment is always pushing back. They react to a world and to people they do not like. They are calculating and clever. And again, think about yourself here, and this time on your bad days. The person of resentment is you in your worst moments, when you lie awake at night, being resentful about the things that have been done to you, the things that you should have said, the comebacks that you wish you would have thought up to get back at these people that now keep you awake because they somehow hurt you or oppressed you or did something that you do not like. The person of resentment is entirely taken over by this feeling, and they are defined by the things they push back against. They are suspicious of otherness. They prefer it when people are like them. They want to belong to a group that confirms them in who they are, and usually these groups they seek out are defined by a great suspicion of everyone who's not like them. Nietzsche elsewhere calls this the herd mentality. Safety in numbers. The person of resentment will try to find political parties, cults, groups of any kind you can think of that help them feel good about themselves, but these groups are probably defined by what they push back against. So whatever stands out and is not the same as them, as these people of resentment, is considered dangerous and therefore evil. Returning to our previous distinction then, where for the good person, the noble aristocratic person, the good came first because it was their self-affirmation, and bad was only kind of an afterthought, the word used for these people not like them. from the perspective of these people who are called bad, right, by the first group of people we talked about, from the perspective of these resentful people, we can describe the sequence of thoughts as follows. These other people, they make me feel bad. I, naturally, don't like them. You know what? They are evil. Why are they evil? Because I don't like them, because they make me feel bad. And I, by contrast, am good. So whereas for the first group of people we talked about, the good comes first and is this sort of this happy self-affirmation, for the second group of people, these people of resentment, the good is secondary because it's only defined in opposition to what they call evil. Now, very important to note that it's only here that terms like good and evil take on moral connotations, because only here is there a need to judge that comes from a sense of self-preservation. It's only from the perspective of the person of resentment that this terminology takes on its contemporary feel of having to put someone in their place. It's from the perspective of these resentful people that these others, right, who make their lives difficult, need to be called evil in order to cordon them off, in order to put them in a particular category that they can then look down upon or somehow revile. The troubling implication, therefore, is that, again, according to Nietzsche, all of this is according to Nietzsche, morality starts from resentment.